Good afternoon, Tom. Thank you for being here and answering this question. It's a unique situation. Eric Visser, part of the Fireside Chat members, brought up a question formally presented by Jules Thornton that we didn't get to answer, but that he feels would be very interesting for you to present in your MBT viewpoint. Now, this involves a psychotherapy treatment called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Um, and I know you have looked into this a little bit and have found something that you can comment on from your MBT viewpoint.
Yes, I have. First, just a little more about what that is. This is a therapy that has been very effective in helping people get past traumatic events, events that are deeply held in their emotional space and they just can't let go of it. And these events then repeat themselves and repeat themselves, sometimes at very inopportune times. And it's just like the person is back there in that terrible situation, experiencing it again. And it can progressively get worse and worse and worse as a person tries to hide from it, get away from it, and stop it. And then they start doing other things like self-medication, to get away from it. So it can be a very serious thing. The soldiers coming back from, the Middle East seem to have PTSD, which is a similar sort of thing. But there's lots of things that will do this to people. It could be that you were in the park with your parents and somebody, robbed you, or maybe beat up your mother or something and you were 6 years old. It could be any sort of thing, just some immensely traumatic, negative experience. Now, what this therapy is it gets the person to talk about their experience while they are shifting their attention back and forth between right and left. So they maybe shift their eyes. The eyes go to the right, then the eyes go to the left, then the eyes go to the right, while they're talking about what happened to them in this awful experience. They find it works just as well if instead of shifting their eyes back and forth, if they tap the right finger, then tap the left finger, then tap the right finger, or tap the right foot or the left foot back and forth. So as long as they're doing something that has this right and left symmetry, which of course means that when you blink or move your eye to the right or blink your right eye, that is a signal that runs through one hemisphere, and then your other eye goes through the other hemisphere, or hand or foot or whatever. The right side of the body is primarily connected to one hemisphere, the other side of the body is connected to the other hemisphere. So what this is doing is it's alternating signals through first this hemisphere, then that hemisphere is paying attention. It kind of forces the person to be going back and forth between their hemispheres. Okay, now that seems to work. If you let that person talk and you talk, about it with them, they go from first the kind of the darkness of their experience, but as they talk and continue to do this, it gets lighter and lighter, and pretty soon they are positive again. And it turns out that this lasts, this positivity, the experience kind of loses its ability to haunt them. And I think what's being done here is that they are connecting the being level space where this terrible experience was in the emotional part. And they're connecting that to the intellect and forcing the person to be aware of, let's say, shifting their eyes or tapping their feet or tapping their fingers. Just that much awareness keeps their intellect involved and somehow enables that intellect to connect to that terrible thing that happened. Whereas before, yes, they have what's called talking therapies. That's the psychiatrist that talks you, around your problem. And the talking therapy tells them, you should understand it was just a bad situation. It was terrible. You did what you had to do. Most anybody would have done the same. You need to accept it and let it go and go on with your life, and yada yada yada. That's the talking therapy. But that doesn't work in these cases, because though the people hear those words, that intellectual understanding that they should let it go and go on never reaches that emotional trauma. Those two stay separate. So that emotional trauma just stays down there and boils and pops up. And intellectually, they know, yes, I should just deal with this and let it go, but they don't seem to be able to do that. So the intellect knows that, but it doesn't affect what's going on at the trauma, at the brain level. And somehow this therapy of talking about it while your eyes are shifting back and forth, or while your toes are tapping back and forth, right to left, fixes that problem. It takes that deep being level space that's traumatized and somehow connects it to that intellect. So now the intellect does have an effect on it. It connects those two spaces. And that seems to be what's going on. So now when they think about it, oh, I need to let that go, and it was just a situation, etc., it actually makes them feel better, and they get over it, and that trauma no longer haunts them. So it's a very effective therapy for people who have some kind of terrible experience that they keep reliving, and they can't let go of it. They can't stop reliving it. And the question, of course, is why? Why does that work? The question was, does MBT theory have any idea why this should work? Well, I've just told you why I think it works. I think it's connecting the intellect to that space in such a way that now the intellect can actually deal with it and let it go. Whereas before, the intellect couldn't, because the intellect just wasn't connected to it. It was sealed off in its own space. Now, the first experiment that I would want to perform, if I were, experimenting or trying to understand this process better, I would want to do some experiments to see whether the back and forth across the various hemispheres, whether that is important, whether that's the significant thing. And it could be, because that could be keeping both hemispheres connected to the issue, rather than maybe if it's just buried in one, it stays down in this hidden space. So maybe it's something like that, but I don't really know why it should be. So I would want to test that first, to have them do something that they could still talk through, but required their intellect to still be functioning, but not having it back and forth. And I thought of a little test I had as a child for manual dexterity and fine motor coordination. And that was, you had this little wire sticking up from a wooden base, it's about 1 foot long, and I had a pile of washers, little small washers. I say not as big as a dime, not that big, but small. And I have to pick up the washers and drop them on. And what the test was is it was timed. So you put as many washers as you could on that stick in 2 minutes. And depending on how many washers you got on the stick, then they gave you some sort of score for your ability to have, small motor coordination, because the little wire was thin, but the hole in the washer was also very thin. So you had to get the washer just right over it before it would drop down. And in any case, that would be something that wouldn't be binaural. It wouldn't be, both sides. Binaural means hearing both sides, because they find that's the same thing. You can put a tone here and a tone there, and it also works. Just like the eyes going back and forth, or the feet tapping, as long as it's energizing the two hemispheres. But if you could do one that was not like that, it wasn't going back and forth between the hemispheres, and see if that would work. And if that didn't work, then I think it would point directly to the fact that as long as only one hemisphere was involved, that the connection between the intellect and that terrible thing, isn't likely to be there. You can't really make that connection. You can't force that connection. That one just doesn't touch the other, has no influence upon the other. But if you can force it to go between the hemispheres, then that intellect, when it says, it was just a situation, and it was just luck, bad luck that I happened to be there at just that time, and that happened, I need to accept it, that it happened, and let it go. that intellect can now actually affect that, that being level space to relax and let go of it. So I'm not sure, though. I'd want to do some more testing before I knew that it actually was the two hemisphere things that is going on, or whether that just happened. That was the therapy they happened to use, and that's an easy thing to do. Tap a foot, tap the other foot. It's just like a simple thing that you could do. So I'm wondering if putting washers on a wire or something like that would work as well. Just a thought. But
Well, I
I
know
don't
with your
really.
theory, you have many ways of testing them out. You don't just use one. And so you are describing the effectiveness of this theory, but you're wondering if there might be something else there. And that's like
Yeah.
typical of you as a scientist to do
Well,
that.
that's just the way I
So
work. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. It's just the way I work. I say, well, maybe it's that, but maybe it's not. Let's do an experiment to find out. And maybe they have done experiments like that to find out. I don't know that much about it. But there's really nothing in MBT that would say why moving the intellect between one hemisphere and the other would somehow affect the connection that the intellect has to the being level space. That I wouldn't really have any good reason why that would happen. But it is a very interesting problem, a very interesting solution to a problem that you can just talk about it while you're tapping different fingers, and it makes all the difference in the world to whether that intellectual solution actually can help, release the angst that's down there in the being level.
It certainly is fascinating, and it
Yeah.
does make a lot of sense. And I hope that answers Jules' question and Eric's. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, but please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.